In chapters 16 and 17, we read about law and business associations. Chapter 16 begins by talking about the three major forms of business organizations in the United States. The first being a sole proprietorship, which would be an organization or a business that is owned and by a particular individual. That individual has sole ownership over management and profits. A lot of times you will see this in, say, a mom and pop type organization. An example that I can think of is a local deli that we have in my town. That would be the example of a sole proprietorship. The particular owner of that company has all the powers and controls over what is happening within that small business. The next thing that the book talks about is the partnership. A partnership is the most commonly used form of business organization within the United States. And then finally, there is also information about corporations. So, as far as the partnership situation is concerned, the book talks about the creation of partnerships and how those partnerships can be formed. I think that it is important to note that a partnership does not have to be just two individuals. It can be a group of individuals as well, those who are going to act in good faith as far as the business is concerned and as far as their partners are concerned. The example that I would see in this type of situation would be one that my father was in. My father was a CPA for a great number of years. He was an employee at a particular CPA firm and worked his way up to partnership within that firm. So in that situation, there were a number of partners. There were partners who obviously had started the business, and then there were partners who had, subsequently retired, and other partners were chosen to sort of come into the fold, if you will, of that particular business. So the chapter talks about the rights and duties, the pros and cons to partnerships, and I think, it also talks about the particular formation and how that all occurs. It's also important to note that partnerships can be terminated. So there, would be a specific process for that to happen through the dissolution of a partnership, but partnerships can be terminated for a number of reasons, and there are obviously legal ways in which to have that done. Another area that this chapter touches upon is franchising. And I think that we have all seen examples of franchising. One that particularly pops out in my mind is the fast food industry, and specifically for us locally, we've had a great number of Chick-fil-A locations that have opened up in Connecticut, and that is a franchise business. So the franchisees have been given permission, allowed, bought into the franchisor who owns that particular, say, Chick-fil-A, and they are then those who set up the locations and distribute the goods and services by that particular company. So I think we all see examples of that, all over those types of businesses, especially in the fast food industry. Chapter 17 talks about corporations a tremendous amount. There are a lot of various types of corporations, many more than I even knew about. So um, I think that it's important to know whether it's a closely held corporation, a publicly held corporation, if there are, is it a subchapter S type corporation? Um, so I think that this chapter was very informative on the variety of different corporations that there are available and that are out there. I think that it is important to note that corporations can be a small group of people. It certainly can be a very large group of people. They are formed for different reasons. There's all types. There's professional corporations, um, for instance, accountants, doctors, lawyers. Those would be all types of professional individuals that would be involved in that type of corporation. And then, there's even nonprofit corporations who are formed specifically for um, the purpose of, it's kind of charitable or religious educational and healthcare associations. So they are not formed with profit in mind. And again, we've seen a lot of those types of businesses as well, from something as your church to you know advertisements that you see for companies that are um, seeking to raise funds, say to support an organization, um, maybe a children's hospital, that type of thing. So um, I think sometimes it's important to be sure, as a side note, as a contributor, to be sure that you are contributing um, to an organization that is not non-profit, um, if that's something that you are interested in, because there are organizations out there that um, perhaps look like they are a nonprofit, or it would seem that they would not be an organization that is in that business for making a profit, yet in fact they really are. So just a side note, if that's something that's important to you, then certainly look into that a bit more. Chapter 17 also talks a lot about the financing of corporations. It talks about the different roles within corporations, from shareholders or stockholders, and what those roles and responsibilities are. It also talks about the role of the board of directors, and this is something that speaks to me personally. I've mentioned before that I am the director of a child care center, and we are governed by a board of directors. So we are not owned, we are not a sole proprietorship, which is the example of something that you might see within a child care business. Um, but we are a corporation, and as such, we are governed by a board of directors. So while I am the director and I am responsible for day-to-day operations of the center, there is also a board that kind of oversees and governs changes that happen. So I am sort of a liaison, if you will, between the center staff and the parents and the board of directors itself. So this particular area was very personal to me because it's an experience that I have on a regular basis. We are not a board, there's no dividends that are taking place, but certainly knowing what the roles and responsibilities are of that board, as a person, the members of that board are volunteer, but it's important so for them to understand what the roles and responsibilities are, because you really want to have an active board who is helping, and not just kind of a figurative board that really isn't participating. And that board, like the book says, really needs to function as a group in the interest of the particular business. The book also talks about the roles and responsibilities of those boards of directors or the officers, and one of the things mentioned is conflict of interest. And this is certainly, I think, important in a variety of areas within businesses, and as you're sitting on boards, whether that board be, a business corporation, or maybe you're sitting on some kind of committee for your church. It's important to understand what a conflict of interest is, what exactly that means, and how that may affect you and your roles and responsibilities uh, within that particular board or committee. And knowing that um, you could be personally benefiting or be personally involved in situations and be able to recuse yourself from decisions that may involve that kind of situation is extremely important. Finally, the chapter winds up with information about limited liability companies, and basically that is a hybrid corporation partnership that is similar to subchapter S, but with many fewer restrictions. And so um, it is important that people understand that an LLC is seen as a separate legal person or entity under state law. It can sue or be sued, enforce contracts, and it can be found civilly and criminally liable for violations of law. So that is an important thing to consider as well, to be sure that when you're creating a limited liability corporation, that you understand what the the potential liability may be for that particular company. And I think that it's important as anybody is thinking about either starting a particular company, a particular type of company, or that they or joining a particular type of company. Maybe there is a partnership that you're thinking about trying to tap into or become part of. It's important to understand what all of those tax ramifications are. What exactly does that mean for you personally, professionally? Have you protected yourself um, as far as your liability is? Do you have you taken out some type of insurance to be sure that you're protecting your own personal interests and investments? So these chapters are extremely important, very informative, but definitely something that you really need to look into if you're getting involved in any of these types of situations. And even as a sole proprietorship, what exactly does that mean for you personally? um, what kind of protections do you need to take out to be sure that you're separating your personal information from, say, the business information? And is there a way that you can separate those situations, those finances, to be sure that everything's very clear of what is business and what is personal? So again, I did think that these chapters were full of important information to know, especially if you're um, venturing into this type of situation, to this type of business. If you are thinking about starting up a business, um, maybe you're thinking about starting a business with a partner, and what does that mean for each of you, and what would be the best scenario for the type of business that you are looking to set up. Thank you.